let's talk about a subject where maybe we were all wrong. I don't know. I don't know if it's one of those cases, or maybe we were all right.
That doesn't. There you go.
This could go both ways. And it's about Netflix games. And finally, some data coming out. This is from Sensor Tower. Netflix games reach 13 million downloads. So according to the report, Netflix games have generated 13 million downloads globally since launching them last year. The most popular month for the platform in terms of downloads was December, which had 2.3 million. And this is incidentally when their second most popular game launched, Asphalt Extreme. They've been doing this less than a year. Everything launched last November. There's 24 titles, more on the horizon. We've talked about it, including a Stranger Things title. What do you guys think of this number? 13 million downloads, 2.3 million in their best month. Netflix games a success? Not really. Were we right? Were we wrong? Jeff, you have thoughts on that?
Just for context, so the company I work for, Homa Games, which maybe you may or may not have heard of, in the last month had 37 million downloads. So downloads in mobile gaming are not, it's not always equivalent, So I guess
like
that's just to give
16 times as much as Netflix's best month.
Yeah. So it's always, yeah. I mean, I would say that's
you're basically calling Netflix games a nothing burger.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I still maintain I don't think they're doing enough. And now, to be fair, they're probably not spending a ton on user acquisition yet. You have to be a Netflix subscriber. You have to be in the Netflix app to find them. So there's a lot of reasons why 13 million may actually be a good start for Netflix, and they may be better or worse than they expected. But just off the top, 13 million to me is not like a wow, this is, taking over the world number.
Jimmy, Lindsay, any thoughts? Maybe, in a different context, do you guys know offhand Netflix's total subscriber numbers?
I Googled it immediately. Yeah. So it's about 222 million. So 13 is about 0.5% of their total user base making a download, which I still think is pretty on par with their strategy. They're not releasing huge. I still feel like they're in the early phases. I think it does worse if the Stranger Things game does poorly, then I think they need to rethink it. But I think so far they haven't released a massive. They've released the Queen's Gambit and some other decent Netflix IP, but they haven't released a game that's nearly as popular as one of their most popular shows like Stranger Things. So I still feel like they're sort of dipping their toe in, and maybe Stranger Things is more of the game that makes the plunge.
So, are you guys concluding that too early? Because I know, Jeff, the context you put this in sort of paints Netflix's gaming efforts in a bad light here. But do you agree that with Lindsay that maybe it's too early to call, or
I think
are you seeing
too early? It's definitely too early, and I have been critical of Netflix, but that comparison was more just to give scale than to say haha, Netflix, you're doing so poorly, because we don't know what they're optimizing for yet, right? It may be all about retention. So those 13 million people, they may have some estimate of, okay, now we've gotten them to stick around Netflix for an extra month, so that's worth $12. So boom, we just made $200 million based on that calculation. We don't know that maybe of those 12 million, 2 million of them were not Netflix subscribers previously, and they joined the service to play the Netflix game. So, oh my God, that would be amazing if they made 2 million new subscribers. I doubt either of those things is the case, but I guess the point is without that extra context of what they're optimizing for, we clearly can't say whether this is a success or failure completely yet.
That clarification I think was super helpful, Jeff, and I didn't take it in a negative way when you shared your own insights. I thought that was wow, okay, so this is the higher end of the spectrum that we're weighing against, and you provided excellent context. What I will say is that the fact that it's even up for debate to me shows that it's successful, because if it was anything less and if it was an instant failure, we would just be branding it as an instant failure. Look at this, it barely cleared 2 million or 5 million downloads. The fact that it did over 10 million and we're actually at 13 I think that's pretty impressive. It's a start. And, now we have one data point to talk about, and we'll see where, like Jeff just said, we'll see where they take it and where the next release or what those next figures are. But honestly, I think if it were a failure, we would more easily classify it as that. The fact that there's even a question about it, to me, indicates that it's at least successful in its own right, and there will be more discussion to be had around it.
Adam, let me just read the comments here. Adam R says there's a small percentage of games based on films, shows that have done well, but the ones that are done well do really well. So it's a risk, but it could be high reward. I mean, that's true, right? Like Stranger Things could be incredibly successful given, how popular the show is, but it could also be a horrible game, right? Just because it's using Stranger Things IP doesn't guarantee success, as we've, I think, discussed many, many times. Chris says, hey, Chris, last week's guest on this live stream. Chris, by the way, everyone has said how amazing you were both on the podcast episode and on the live stream, and how much they love the show with you. It says 0.5%. That's about the penetration of esports fans to video games. So chalk it up as a win. All right. Okay. Taking a shot at esports. Kevin says 13% of 220 million is over 28 million. Where's the 13%?
It's a 13 was the million downloads, not percent.
Yeah, 13 million downloads. And again, where the 0.5% assumes each download was from.
Yeah, it's 5%. My decimal places were off.
But 5% is assuming each individual download was from a separate Netflix user, right? Because you could have one Netflix user download 3 games, and therefore it would be a smaller percentage of the total Netflix user base or viewer base. Matt says you have to imagine Netflix is happy with this. Why else would they release these download numbers? I mean, we don't know that they released them. I don't think the article said it was. This was from a third-party report. How they're getting the data, I'm not sure, but this wasn't a PR fluff piece from Netflix, that's for sure. Matt says, it seems easier to make a successful show out of a game than to make a successful game out of a show. Do you guys all agree with that? Anyone disagree?
Let's see how the Queen's Gambit chess game does. It just launched. We just talked about it. So no, I'm not sure, Matt. That's always the age-old question, right? Is how this IP is applied and where it is where it has its strongest start. Shows are hard to make too. Games aren't the only. I think we're biased here because we're all gaming, related or gaming centric. But shows are very hard to do. I mean, look at Halo. That was not a great show. So I think it's more about the team. It's hard to,
historically, the trope was like taking games and making movies out of them was like a disaster. Like it never worked. I think in the last 3 years, we've seen a lot of examples of games being turned into shows that have worked. So maybe that is not necessarily the case anymore. But historically, I think it was always like it always failed when you tried to make a movie.
Chris says, thanks for the kind words. Love the new time. Chris, that feedback is really important. Thank you. We really want to know if you guys like this new time, as I mentioned. So please continue letting us know, even if it's in messages after the fact, if you're listening to this, even after the fact, and maybe you're usually here live, let us know. Adam R says The Witcher is the exception, not the rule. True, but it's a strong example. It's a strong sort of thing to point to, and you could look at League and Arcane. I mean, TV shows that come from games seem to have done pretty well recently.